Words matter. Your choice of words and how you think about things makes a huge difference in whether you're going to develop trust with someone or erode the trust bond that you've built. I want to talk today about words and word choices. And today we're going to get a little bit deeper into the internal motivations that you have to put into place to be successful in creating a trusting relationship. So let's talk a little bit about the power you have to either have a positive or negative interaction with someone. And positive and negative is actually the first of our objectives. We're going to talk a little bit about phrasing things in a manner that either detracts from a relationship or adds to a relationship and why that's important. The second thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about the impact of your internal and external word choices on you and how you will change both in your approaches as well as your personal regard, depending on how you phrase things both internally and externally. The third thing we're going to talk about is whether you're setting situations up for success or failure, because you can do both. And those things are based on how you phrase the environment, phrase the interaction, talk about what to expect next when you're talking to other people. Finally, we'll get a little bit into what I like to call tragic words versus magic words. What are the words that are going to destroy a relationship, that are going to deteriorate trust, that are going to cause friction, and you should take completely out of your lexicon? They need to leave your vocabulary forever. And if you're going to have those things leave your vocabulary, what can you say instead? And we'll have a little bit of fun with that. So buckle up, here we go. And let's talk about our trust tip for today, which is word choices and the fact that words matter and your word choices matter. The first thing I want to talk about is the decision on whether you're going to use positive language or negative language. And that kind of is the overview for everything we're going to talk about today. If you reference something in a positive way, you're setting the environment up for a successful interaction. You want to look at positivity. If you phrase things in a negative way, then what you're doing is you're actually setting up the encounter to not go well. You're setting people up to actually fail before you even begin. Likewise, if you talk to people about what can be done, it's a very different interaction than talking to someone about what you can't do. And finally, look at things from the perspective of the person you're speaking with. Is that perspective one where you're assuming positive intent? Or are you assuming negativity? Because you all know what we say about when we assume. I won't go there. So when you look at that positivity versus negativity, what would that look like? Well, let's use a couple of examples. The first one is, let's talk about how we phrase what's going on in our world. So raise your hand if you've ever said, "Oh my God, I'm so busy." Don't lie, I know you've said that. We've all said that at one time or another. "Oh, I'm so busy, I don't know how I'm going to get through this." Well, you've just set yourself up for failure. You've already put in the parameters that you are in a situation which is out of your control and that you don't have an environment that is controllable. And so you're saying to someone before anything has happened, this is not going to be a good outcome for what's going on. Now, do you get busy? I'm sure that you do. But let's think a little bit about how we can rephrase that statement. You're not busy. You're popular. You have many people who are seeking your assistance. I know. That sounds a little hokey, but I want you to try it. Instead of saying to someone, "Oh my God, I'm so busy," you say to them, "You know, a lot of people have reached out to me for assistance," which is really a compliment I appreciate, but I want to make sure that I'm meeting everyone's needs. Can you and I talk a little bit about what time frames you have so I can ensure that we have good communication on when I can get this done? We're not busy. We're super popular. Lots of people are seeking our assistance today. I am so sorry that's causing a delay, but I promise you that we will get you just as soon as we can. And I appreciate everybody wanting to come to us for help. Okay. Very different. Very, very different. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the tragic language and magic language. Let's also talk about going at something from what can't be done instead of what can be done. If you say to someone, I can't do that, conversation is over. You've just terminated it. Instead, consider saying, while I can't offer you that, what I can do is, or even skip the first part entirely. Somebody asks you for $1 million. You don't have $1 million. You say to them, wow, that's a really interesting request. What I can do is I can buy you dinner tonight. Would that be helpful? And again, I'm using extremes to add a little bit of humor to this, but this can be very practical. Somebody asks you to hit a deadline tonight. You already have 4 other things on your plate that you've had to prioritize. Say to the person, I really appreciate that this is important. What I can do is get it to you by noon tomorrow. Would that be acceptable? Okay. You haven't agreed to do something you can't do, but you've said what can be done. Very, very different interaction. Positivity versus negativity. You need to couch things in the positive so that you set yourself up for success. Why is that important? It's because it changes the way you look at yourself. And the first person we have to be honest and true to is the person we see in the mirror every day. So recognizing that your personal accountability, your personal regard, the way you approach things is the first step in everything we do from a trusting perspective. You need to get yourself set straight first. So when you come at things from a place of positivity and you choose words that show the positive nature of what's going on, it changes your attitude and the way you approach things. If you look at someone and you say, oh my God, I can't stand working with them. Again, you've set yourself up for failure. Instead, say, well, here comes today's challenge. This is something I'm going to be able to accomplish, and I will have accomplished something at the end of the day. When you work with someone who's very difficult to work with, look at how can you turn that around internally to say, here comes my personal growth opportunity for today. And again, it may sound a little bit hokey, but what you'll find is that if you come to that habit where you're looking at things as personal challenges, where you can grow yourself, where you can achieve success, where you can create an environment where you have learned something, you will have a much more positive attitude about yourself at the end of the day. Likewise, let's talk about how we impact others with our word choice. Has anyone ever referred to someone as difficult to you? Calling someone difficult is like the word of death. You have now set up that next interchange between someone you're not involved with and someone else you're not involved with, and you've set that exchange up for failure. Oh my goodness, this person is so difficult. Good luck. Instead, shift that dynamic. Change the words. This individual is really anxious. I want you to be ready. They're going to have lots of questions. You're describing the behaviors that you've placed that judgment on. Difficult is a judgment word. So get out of your judgment words and move into behavioral descriptions. It's a change in your habits that can completely change other people's interactions with the customer, with the coworker, with the colleague. Instead of saying, I don't understand why they never listen, you can say, when you're working with this individual, be prepared. Sometimes you're going to see their attention wander, so you may have to pull them back to the point of the conversation while you're talking. Different than saying this person doesn't care about what you have to say. They don't care about what you have to say is a judgment statement. They sometimes can get distracted. Be on alert for that is a helpful statement. It's a positive statement. It's recognizing a behavior, but then talking about how to reinforce the communication pattern to create success. So finally, let's talk about those tragic words. These are words that you should never say again. Get them out of your vocabulary. The first one is going to cause a little controversy. You should never say no. Wait a minute, Laura Click. I've been told my whole career that you have to learn how to say no. You have to figure out how to set limits. Well, sure, you absolutely do. But the word no is a closing word. It ends the conversation, creates relationship strain, and reduces trust. I'm going to give you my trick word. It means no. but it is not the word no. And that word is unfortunately. It's one of my very favorite words in the world. Hey, Laura, click, I'd like you to do a consultation for my organization for free. No. Unfortunately, because I have to ensure that I am fair to everyone who seeks my services, I do have a pricing structure that we can talk about. I'll make that as affordable as possible, but I do have to ask that I'm compensated for my time. Now, what did I just say? I said no, but I said it in a way that explained the reason why. No ends a conversation, unfortunately begins an explanation of why. Completely different pathways. Does it take a little bit longer to use the word unfortunately? Sure it does. But when we're talking about an investment in relationship to build trust, that time is absolutely worth it. It's also going to reduce the amount of arguing that occurs. If you've ever had a teenager, I've raised two. Thankfully, they no longer are teenagers and I survived. But I used to have to tell them no all the time. Mom, I want to go with my friends to an overnight at Joe's house. Well, that was going to be a big no. But I'm not going to use that word. Instead, I would look at my daughter and say, you know your safety is my number one priority. Unfortunately, doesn't sound like an environment where we can ensure your safety. At this time, I don't think that that's a reasonable request. Now, that's not impossible because, again, teenage girl to argue with, but pretty hard to argue with because I went to our number one goal in our household, which was safety. Another word that I want you to take completely out of your vocabulary is busy. I already talked a little bit about you can use popular, you can use many people seeking my assistant, but when you use the word busy, that's setting yourself up as a victim of your circumstance. Nobody appreciates a victim. We want to be victors. Changing that lexicon to I have many requests on my plate right now, or I'm super popular, I have a lot of priorities, let's talk about where this fits in. That's what a victor would say, not a victim. So shift away from calling yourself busy. That one tip, if you can get that into your habits, will again completely change your world. Another word I don't ever want you to use again is difficult. We talked about that. People aren't difficult. They're anxious. They're worried. They're frightened. Name the emotion that they're actually feeling because that gives you the recognition that they're in a really tough situation. It also immediately brings you into a conversation where you're describing somebody as difficult. And even if you're talking to them directly, you can't say, don't be difficult. Say, I can see that you're anxious. Let's talk a little bit about how we can work together to make you feel more secure. If you're describing someone to someone else, this is a difficult client. They're not a difficult client. This is a client who really appreciates a lot of attention to detail. Make sure you're detailed. You're setting up the interactions for success. So those are 3 examples of magic words that you probably use every day that I would suggest you take completely out of your vocabulary. If this was helpful to you, and I hope it was, please practice this. This doesn't come naturally. You're going to have to go ahead and use skills practice like anything else. You're welcome to go ahead and give me a quick follow and like this video so I know whether this content was something that was of benefit to you. If you have suggestions for topics you'd like me to cover in the future, go ahead and drop those in the comments. I'll read the comments and that's what's going to determine what I film next. And finally, if Click Advisors can be of assistance to you in the future, feel free to reach out to us. We can actually take things like words matter and put it into a training module that is specialized for your environment and use your examples and have skills practice with your team. Thanks again for your time and attention. I wish you the very best, and let's get out there and make our word choices in a way that matters, that grows trust and builds relationships and ensures that we are working collaboratively towards a common goal of success. Thank you so much.